Hello again everybody and welcome back. In this video we're going to have a look at using the Bavarian Demon Cortex Pro with a single receiver and a serial connection. It's a question that comes up occasionally on internet forums or groups. And just to prove that it can be done with the older receivers, I'm going to be using one of the older style R receivers, an R8. Of course, you can use the more modern Rex receivers as well. So, what do we mean by a serial connection? Well, there's just going to be one cable from the receiver to the Cortex Pro carrying all the channel data that it needs, rather than using the multi-cable that comes with your Bavarian Demon, where you have to plug everything in for each control channel and for the gain. Okay, so you can still do that, of course, if you want to, but one cable certainly looks a lot neater. There is, in my opinion, just one thing to think about, and it applies to all radio systems you would use with a Demon Cortex Pro, and in fact it applies to the standard Cortex as well as the Pro, and that is, do you want to power all the output servos connected to the Cortex from just that one cable? You might say, well, we're just providing one cable power from the battery into the receiver, so you're happy with that. If not, then perhaps you could connect another cable to a spare socket on your receiver or direct from the battery into a spare port on the Cortex if there is one available, but not into the programming socket, as it does say in the instructions, do not put power in through that. Now you might be thinking there is supposed to be, with Jeti, a connecting cable to socket 4 on the Cortex Pro, but that doesn't apply in this case where we're powering it from a receiver itself. That particular instruction applies only when you're connecting a Cortex Pro in serial mode to a Jeti central box, because the receiver sockets on a Jeti central box are extremely current limited, and Bavarian Demon is a bit wary of powering the two receivers and the Cortex Pro from those two current limited sockets on a central box. If you're taking just a serial feed from a standard receiver, then you're okay because you're not using the current limited sockets. But if you fancy putting a bit more power in because you've got a lot of hungry servos connected to the Cortex, then if you've got a spare socket like socket 4 on the Cortex, by all means I suggest go ahead and do that. So we need to set up our model. I have chosen just to use the basic properties of a 2-aileron 2-flap model with elevator, single rudder, and as well as that, of course, you have got to have a gain channel. So create a gain function, assign a control to it. I'm going to use the P8 knob so I can change the gain and go heading mode or rate mode. And very importantly, remember to assign a channel to it. You'd be surprised the number of people who send me a question asking why something's not working. And I tell them to, well, have a look in servo monitor, tell me what it's doing, and they go, oops, didn't assign a servo to it, or I did, but I've got the throttle lock on, or whatever it is, and that's why the servo's not moving. So always have a look in servo monitor if things don't work, and that will often give you a clue. So we've got the gain function and a gain channel. Now, the Cortex Pro in this mode will have 7 output channels available to it, marked channels 1 to 6, and socket A can be channel 7, unless you want to use socket A as a secondary receiver input, which I would suggest really you'd put that direct into your receiver if you could, although the older R receiver that I'm using today can't do it. Anyway, so channels 1 to 7 as shown there will come out of sockets 1 to 6, and then socket A will take channel 7. And if you had other things in higher number channels that you wanted to be stabilized by the Pro, then just move your servo assignment around. For instance, here channel 3 and 4 with the flaps, I don't need them stabilized, so they could be moved up to higher channel numbers and put something else in there that you need. Because it has 7 outputs, the Cortex Pro can cope with, for example, 2 ailerons, 2 elevators, 2 rudders, and nose wheel steering if you needed that. Okay, so let's switch the system on. Now, at the moment, just to prove that our basic model is working, we've got the receiver, and I've got plugged in aileron, elevator, and rudder servo. The Cortex is not linked in yet, so we need to look at setting up the receiver for it. We go into Device Explorer, and here is where we have to tell it that the EXT socket will be XBus. So we go in here, choose XBus, and set that. If you're using a Rex receiver, then you would use one of your expander sockets, for example, and choose that. Okay, and the next little line down here tells us that the XBus pin is the EXT socket on the receiver. So there we are, we've got a cable in the EXT socket, and we just come up here, get it the right way around, and we plug it into socket B on the Cortex. In it goes, and up it's come, powering on. Okay, the next thing we do is we take our bound plug and we put it in, because what we want the Cortex to do is work out that it's using Jeti's EX bus rather than, say, an S bus or JRX bus or SRXCL, whatever. So we put our bind plug in, we get rapid blue flashing for a few seconds, and then you see the change to a slower blue flashing, and that means that it's worked out that it's getting Jeti AX bus and it's now happy to work with it. So we can now go ahead and plug servos in and prove that it's at least picking up the serial connection. So I'll just pause for a second whilst I change the servos over to the Cortex. Okay, I've done that. So as you can see, the servos are no longer plugged into the receiver. They're plugged into the Cortex and in the same numbering. So what is channel 2 was output 2 on the receiver is now output 2 on the Cortex. 6 from the receiver went to 6 on the Cortex, and the rudder, which was in 7, is in socket A. So now these should work. If I move aileron, yes, elevator, yes, and rudder, yes. So our serial connection is working. Okay, now we need to tell it what to stabilize. And for that, we switch it off, put our little binding plug into the programming socket, and read the instructions. Because once we switch it on, we're going to get all sorts of light flashes. There's the quick start manual. This is what we're looking for. Green, then a load of red flashes, couple of white flashes, and then it goes into the sequence. At 2 green flashes, you put on full right aileron and hold. Hold it there until you get a single green flash. Go left aileron and hold it, and so on. Down elevator and hold, up elevator and hold, right rudder and hold, left rudder and hold. Then move the gain tuning knob full extent. I've got it at the center at the moment, like a stick would be. I will move it fully one way or the other and just leave it there. It'll pick that up, and then we'll get the full sequence of green flashing lights. That's the theory anyway. So, watching the little flashing light, we'll switch it back on, and off we go. Full right, full left aileron, full down, full up, full right rudder, full left rudder, and now swing the gain tuning knob. There we are, all the green flashing lights, as it says there. So that's it happy. I will remove the binding plug, switch it off, switch it back on again. Okay, now the gain tuning knob's all the way around, so if I put the gain tuning knob back to the middle, there we go. Red with the gain tuning knob in the middle. If I turn it left, the light should change to colour. There, it's gone yellow. Probably doesn't show up very well on the camera, but take my word for it, that's the yellow colour. Go back to the middle, it'll turn red for off. If I go the other way, yes, it turns green. So our gain tuning knob has picked up and worked. With the gain off, I'll show our servos still work. So we've got aileron, elevator, rudder. I will turn the gain tuning up now. We'll go the green way. I think that's heading mode. I'm not sure. We'll find out in a second. What happens if I move the gyro? There we are. Yes, I'm in heading mode. Can you see how the servos are trying to retain position? So roll. I'll just do roll, pure roll. Yaw and pitch. There we are. And that's it set up. And now there is an advantage to having the serial connection to it because it's X-Bus, and because Bavarian Demon properly integrates with Jeti, your Cortex Pro now turns up in Device Explorer. There we are. And you can get to all the settings there just the same as if you were using it in the twin receiver mode with a central box. You can set up all your banks, etc. Incidentally, if you did want to use socket B for a dual receiver, this is where you would come and switch that ability on, but do read the full instruction manual, of course. The little quick start guide that you get with your Bavarian Demon is not the full instruction manual. For that you need to go to Bavarian Demon's website and have a good read through that. Righto folks, all the best with that and have fun with it.